From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo, and this is From the South. In an unprecedented move, a Brazilian court has ordered the release of ex-president Lula da Silva. A federal judge, Rogerio Favreto, decided to grant freedom to former President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva, who has been imprisoned since April 7th in Curitiba over alleged charges of corruption that investigators failed to prove. The order determines the suspension of the provisional sentence and grants Lula freedom immediately. Following the news on Sunday morning, Judge Sergio Moro, who sentenced Lula in the first place, tried to revoke the release order. Judge Favreto responded by reiterating his decision again and called for Lula to be released immediately. Lula's Workers' Party, the PT, issued a statement shortly after the decision, saying through the decision of Judge Favreto, the judicial system, which has been manipulated so often to persecute Lula and deprive him of freedom, now recognizes that he has a right to defend his freedom as the Constitution guarantees to everyone. Later on Sunday, President of the PT, Gleisi Hoffmann, released a second letter saying that a number of players in Sunday's drama were all guilty of obstructing justice by preventing Lula's release. It says that Sergio Moro, Thompson Flores, Magistrate Gebran, and the federal police in Curitiba are all accomplices of the same violence against Lula's rights, against democracy, and against the freedom of the people to vote for who to represent them in the October presidential elections. It goes on to call for the order to be repeated and fulfilled. Social movements in Curitiba have taken to the streets to demand the fulfillment of the decision and await the next move, and this is a spontaneous twist in the case of Brazil's most popular candidate for the presidency.
That we have heard from today. So he's been in the Curitiba building of the federal regional court for an hour and a half now, and we still don't know anything. We do know that the order to release Lula has reached the federal police, and so the federal police is doing its legal and normal methods and procedures to release Lula. So we are just waiting to see if the federal police is going to go ahead with the release, if the president of the court is going to do a decision different than the last one from the judge that wanted to release Lula. So we are waiting to see everything. Everything is on the open, and that's the latest. And we also know that the judge, the original judge who ordered Lula to be released, he's now under investigation for a possible disciplinary for doing a wrong decision in the first place. So he is now being investigated, and we are seeing a split country and a split legal country here in Brazil right now, because we have this judge being investigated, we have requests for Judge Moro to be investigated as well, and so you can see how everything is very divided on this subject.
Mia, you're in Brazil. What's happening on the ground in Curitiba right now?
Well, in Curitiba, you are seeing a big demonstration waiting for Lula to be released. Since today's early afternoon, we're seeing dozens of Lula supporters there, and more are coming. And we are seeing also an increase in security inside the prison and outside. We have been seeing a lot of choppers in the region in Curitiba, because everyone is mobilizing there, and also some of the Workers' Party elements have asked people to go to the streets. We are also seeing a big demonstration in Rio de Janeiro, and in São Paulo it's a small one. We're also seeing a couple dozens of people in the streets. So what we are seeing nationwide in the streets is a lot of support for Lula, but we're also seeing a lot of people who are against him or who are against this decision, but not against Lula, also speaking up and saying how they don't agree with this decision.
Now, what do you think the chances are of President Temer and the ruling elite in Brazil allowing an order like this to go through?
Well, this will go through the president of this regional court, and if he does not decide, then it will go through the Supreme Court of Justice, and then it will go through the Supreme Federal Court. So there's still three organs of the judicial system here in Brazil that will have to decide on this decision if there's no common ground found today. So, and what I've told you earlier is that all of the lawyers and experts I've talked to, regardless of what they think of this particular case or what they think of Lula's case, or what their political inclinations are, they all believe one thing is that the judicial system in Brazil is very frail and it's very blurry how it works. So it's anyone's guess what can happen in this case and in any of Lula's cases.
Mia, thank you so much for your information. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. More news now. João Pedro Estedil is a Brazilian economist, activist, and writer. Our correspondent Andre Veira interviewed him in Brazil on Saturday. Here's what he had to say about the future of Brazil with Lula.
We have a work plan that includes pressuring authorities into freeing Lula and at the same time debating a new political project for Brazil. We are certain that Lula now realizes how the bourgeoisie betrayed him, how the bourgeoisie handed the Brazilian economy to the US, and how after his victory his government will have to become a force for the people. Yesterday he told us that when he gets out of jail, he will call for a referendum to repeal those measures. What is a referendum? It's an invitation for the people to take part in these changes. What is a referendum? It's an invitation for the people to take part in these changes. He also said that he will call for a constituent assembly to overturn our rotten political model. With this, Lula has reiterated that his government will be of the people, not only benefiting the people, but with the people.
And on to Colombia now, where there is growing collective outrage over murders of social leaders. People have gathered in public spaces across the country to reject the killings and to demand that the government do more to protect the lives of activists.
Thousands of Colombians joined the march called Mobilization to Protect Life, to condemn the murders and show solidarity with the victims.
People are angry because more than 400 leaders have been murdered after signing the peace agreement. The oligarchy has deceived us.
Colombians raised their voices to stop the slaying of those who have worked hard to bring peace to different territories.
Respect for life, respect for dignity, respect for freedom of speech. We want peace. Peace is not built with bullets. Peace is built with social justice.
More than 100 social leaders have been assassinated so far in 2018, and around 400 since the signing of the peace agreement. People denounce the constant threat imposed by paramilitary groups in rural areas, and the murder, stigmatization, and persecution of human rights activists.
Do not murder us because we think differently. They can shut us down.
The government's dirty hands are behind this because it is presumed that the paramilitaries have never demobilized.
The citizens say they fear for the arrival of the elected president, Ivan Duque, because he represents the interests of the extreme right, putting at risk to the peace agreement and threatening social movements in Colombia.
The new government has a lot to work on. It is incredible that the murders of social leaders are on the rise. In 8 days, 15 people have been murdered, and coincidentally, they are always the ones that supported the candidacy against Ivan Duque.
The flags of various social organizations are also waving as a way to demand the implementation of the peace agreement achieved with the FARC.
After seeing hundreds of people in many other cities, we're going to win the fight for reconciliation and peace.
A minute's silence was observed to pay tribute to the leaders, and a candle was raised, a symbol of hope for Colombians to continue working for peace and fighting for the legacy of leaders who have been killed.
Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega has said that he has no intention of bringing presidential elections forward. Ortega is standing firm against ongoing pressure by violent opposition movements following months of protests that have left over 200 dead. At a rally in Managua, Ortega told supporters his opponents were coup mongers who would need to take him out of office via the ballot box. He indicated presidential elections could happen on schedule and no sooner. Ortega was re-elected in 2016 and presidential elections are not scheduled until 2021. Protesters have been demanding early elections in a bid to get him out of office.
Want to reach the government, they'll need to seek the vote of the people. Let's see if the people will vote for the coup mongers who have caused so much destruction these days. There's still time, as mandated by law. There's still time before the election. Everything has its time.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Cambiará la estrategia fallida de combate a la inseguridad y a la violencia. Más que el uso de la fuerza, atenderemos las causas que originan la inseguridad y la violencia. Estoy convencido de que la forma más eficaz y más humana de enfrentar estos males exige necesariamente del combate a la desigualdad y a la pobreza.
Entrando él rápidamente va a tomar decisiones muy fuertes, ¿no? Como esto de la iniciativa, como esto de la justicia transicional, como esto de las comisiones de la verdad, como esto de un proceso de pacificación del país, como esto de una recomposición social, un respeto a las instituciones.
Welcome back, and now let's go live with Mia Alberti, who has breaking news from Brazil.
Hi, Steffi. So we just learned the decision of the president of the regional court, which is where all of these decisions have been battled today. And his decision is that Lula will remain in jail and that his case will continue on the office of the judge Gebra Neto, which is the judge, if you remember today, that was barring the decision to release Lula. And because he's also the judge who is in charge of Lula's case in these specific courts. So that's it. Lula will remain in jail. The next steps that his defense can have is to appeal this decision to the Supreme Court of Justice, and after that to the Supreme Federal Court. But that's unlikely because the judicial system here in Brazil is in recess, so that will take a lot of time. And also the decision of this president of the regional court says that the argument that was behind the decision to release him in the first place is also not applicable. The argument that he should be released because he's a pre-candidate for the presidential election, so he needs to be released to participate in the electoral campaign. So he also said that is not an argument for his release. So this is it. We don't have any reaction from the Workers' Party or his defense team because this has just happened, but today Lula will remain in jail.
Thank you, Mia, for your information. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. More stories now. Salvadorians have been taking to the streets for the past month, demanding that water stays in the hands of the people, not private businesses. In early June, just a month after conservative majority legislature went into session, lawmakers began to approve measures within their right-wing arena, comprehensive water law that would privatize water. Their bill would also create a water management oversight committee, but stacked with private business leaders.
We're waging a battle against the interests of the Arena Party, which is a predominant right-wing party here in El Salvador, in their efforts to privatize the water in our country. The FMLN has 4 bills in the Legislative Assembly which we have not been able to get passed. A general law of water that has to do with everything related to water, not only the distribution, but also the care of water and the management of water sources in our country. Unfortunately, we've been struggling for 6 years in the Legislative Assembly to be able to approve a law, and it has not been possible. A lot of excuses have been given by the right wing, mainly by the Arena Party, for not wanting to advance the discussion. First, they say that it needed to be a bill presented by the President of the Republic. Then in 2017, a draft law was presented, proposed by the government. They advanced on it. 90 articles were approved, and then the discussions and approval stopped before defining the directors of that law. The FMLN wanted public institutions to head the project, but the right wing wanted representatives from private institutions as directors of the water management body.
In Haiti, civil unrest is entering into its 3rd day, despite a fuel hike reversal. Burned carts and roadblocks dotted the highways in Haiti, while many stores remained closed. Prime Minister Jacques Lafontaine announced the temporary suspension of double-digit government hikes to prices for gasoline, diesel, and kerosene on Saturday afternoon, just a day after they were announced. But the unrest has continued. The decision to raise prices was part of an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. With Dominica currently under a tropical storm warning, Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit visited shelters in some of the country's most vulnerable communities. Skerrit said that he and the members of his cabinet met with various shelter managers and volunteers to assess their level of preparedness in the event that a storm hits this island of Dominica. Skerrit also said that he'd been ensuring that shelters have every resource it needs to overcome any foreseeable challenge. After Andrés Manuel López Obrador's win in the July 1st elections, social and collective movements promised to support him, but they also demand he keeps his promises made during the campaign.
Nada les cuadra que Andrés los enseñe a gobernar.
Members of the Citizen Mailbox Collective have supported López Obrador since 2006, when he first ran for president.
Queremos un México con democracia.
We want a Mexico with democracy where people have the possibilities to move forward, to develop, that everyone has opportunities to study, to work, to have the same rights, and to end discrimination.
They say they are satisfied with the result of the election and they will continue supporting López Obrador and the Partido Nacional Regeneration Movement that obtained the majority in the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate and won in 31 of the 32 states.
This victory can be explained by what we are seeing here at this moment, in the meeting of neighbors and by the participation of grassroots movements, workers, settlers, peasants of the Republic who followed with the campaign with affection.
He started to meet with businessmen, with politicians. Everyone started to meet with him, and we're here. He's going to meet with us, but if he doesn't, it's up to us to demand to be heard, to demand not only to say yes to everything or no to everything.
During the campaign, López Obrador committed to review work on the lands near Texcoco.
They were infatuated with this new airport. Instead, they could do 2 airport runways.
Meanwhile, the group Fiscalía que Sirva is demanding that whomever runs the country from December 1st reconsider the proposal to appoint a general attorney from the board of directors. They believed it reduces autonomy to the figure in charge of the dispensation of justice.
We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
So she's basically said no hats, no shirts, no socks. We have two men who are her friends and right here in hats. We are the only black people out here. And as soon as we walked up, she had something to say. We have bothered no one. We have said anything to no one.
Welcome back. The economic war between U.S. and China continues, with the U.S. implementing tariffs on more than 800 Chinese products. Our correspondent Isaura Diaz has the details.
The economic war between the U.S. and China continues. This Friday, U.S. tariffs of 25% came into effect, targeting more than 800 Chinese products. On the other hand, China also slapped tariffs of 25% on U.S. goods, mainly agricultural products. The Minister of Commerce has emphasized that with these tariffs, the U.S. has started the biggest economic war in history. They are convinced that these actions are harmful and are a serious threat to global industry. The Minister of Commerce also recalled that China has promised not to make the first move in this economic war, but was forced to in order to defend its interests. The minister also said to be sure that these tariffs will not only affect both countries, but also various multinationals, companies, and small businesses across the world. Nonetheless, Beijing has reaffirmed they will continue to welcome foreign investment. Back to you.
Thank you, Isaria, for your information. Croatian National World Cup team manager Satlo Dalic has refused to comment on the far-right Ukrainian celebrations of some of his players after they beat Russia in the quarterfinals. After the match, Croatian players Domagoj Vida and Ohgen Budokej published a video on social media where they dedicated the win to Ukraine, uttering "Glory to Ukraine," a Ukrainian far-right nationalist slogan used prominently by fascist militias fighting pro-Russian separatists in the country's east. Rescue workers are struggling in the mud and water after heavy rainfall devastated parts of Japan. The death toll increased to 57 people on Sunday. The torrential downpours have wreaked havoc with landslides and desperate residents taking shelters on rooftops. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe warned of a race against time to rescue people as the death toll is expected to rise. The UN Security Council is being urged by Chief Said Rad al-Hussein to refer Myanmar to the International Criminal Court so that allegations of crimes against humanity can be investigated. Violence in the Rakhine state continues as the number of people fleeing and seeking sanctuary in Bangladesh increases. As of mid-June, there were 11,000 new arrivals.
No amount of
4 of the 12 schoolboys trapped in an underground cave in Thailand have been rescued and flown to a hospital in the city of Chiang Rai. The rescue mission to save the remaining boys has been postponed until Monday as night fell and conditions became increasingly dangerous. Members of the Wild Boar soccer team have been trapped for more than 2 weeks now after the cave flooded. And while Brazilians focus on Russia's World Cup, Congress, court, and the government have implemented several controversial policies. Our team took to the streets to understand if soccer is being used as a smokescreen or if it can be a resource to unite people and fight social conflicts in the country.
During the World Cup, Brazilian government approved privatization of 70% of the oil camps in El Presal, sanctioned the spread of new agrotoxics and the sale of organic food. The Supreme Court denied Lula's freedom in comparison to what happened with the processes against Aécio Neves. They all allowed municipal guards to use weapons as part of the military intervention, which has killed 8 people from the favela da Mare. People yell for football while others do it against the government.
Apart from the country's situation, we still support Brazil at the World Cup. It is important to express ourselves. If we don't get dressed in red, we do it with yellow, but in some way we still protest.
Is it football to blame?
There will always be opposition to football as a means of alienation, but it's not fair, because it's also art, even if it always was contradictory. We support the national team, but the World Cup spends public money. We watch Pelé videos, but he never protested in his life. But people have the right to support whatever they want, and football is just emotion.
In the midst of economic crisis, bars benefit with a wider number of customers during Brazil's games.
We've been selling a lot more than before.
But it isn't that way for everyone.
They are killing our economy. It's good for restaurants, but other small companies don't work for the games.
In 2014, middle and high class were able to attend the World Cup's opening day in Brazil. Those who insulted Dilma Rousseff and they wore the Brazilian jersey to call for a coup. In response to that, others used an alternative jersey.
The Brazilian jersey turned into a symbol of opposition against the Workers' Party, against the left, against communism. They say our jersey will never be red. Some of us disagree. We think that what they caused was too bad for Brazil, and we don't want to associate with that, even if we support the national team.
For some people, football can also be a tool for union and for struggle against democratic crisis in Brazil.
We painted the street. We work on that hoping that the country changes in some way with the World Cup.
Some see parallels between the World Cup and politics in the country.
In 1950, we lived Maracanazo when we lost to Uruguay. There was gonna be a coup 4 years later, but got delayed because of Getúlio Vargas' suicide. And in 1964, 14 years later, there was a military coup in Brazil. It is clear that it is not just that. The football doesn't cause that, but it is an element that affects people's mood and the way they see the country.
From the unforgettable complaints of the mothers of Plaza de Mayo during the World Cup, passing by the now by Ter Copa against evictions during Brazil 2014, football is far from the people's opiate. It is considered a change to score against coups.
Supporters of the Russian football team gave their boys a very warm welcome in Moscow after their defeat against Croatia. Despite their narrow defeat on the pitch, Russian fans in their droves still think their team are heroes and gave them a rapturous cheer to that effect. Russia lost to Croatia in a penalty shootout on Sunday, but the team are still winners in the eyes of their supporters. The semifinals start on July 10th with two great matches. 1998 World Cup champions France will play against Belgium, and Croatia will face England. And we end with news that Eritrea and Ethiopia could finally be ending their 20-year military standoff. Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been welcomed by his Eritrean counterpart, Isaias Afwerki, on Sunday for a historic peace summit in Asmara that could mark the official end to the conflict. The meeting is the first of its kind between the leaders of the two Horn of African countries, who have been rivals since they fought a war in the late 1990s in which around 80,000 people died. In early June, Ethiopia announced it would honor all the terms of a peace deal, suggesting the government might be ready to settle a border dispute. Eritrea responded positively. And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.